4:30, the flu now making a comeback after a few years with masks and a lot of time alone at home. But some experts say the season now is turning out not to be as severe as perhaps they initially thought. Joining us right now to talk more about it is Dr. David Shapiro, the Chief Medical Officer at St. Francis Hospital. Doctor, thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
What is the situation right now with the flu? Can you say what you're currently seeing?
Well, I think flu has kind of fallen off people's radar. We're wearing masks most of the time. And even though we're doing that less, we're still washing our hands and we're avoiding crowds. And flu season usually peaks between December and February. But across the U.S., there are pockets of activity where we're seeing a big increase. And although there's a little bit of worry about it, people have to be aware.
What do you think are the reasons that we, maybe aren't seeing the numbers that some had thought we'd see?
Well, sometimes it's just because of the nature of the virus itself. Some viruses are less virulent. Some people get themselves vaccinated for the flu. But it could just be that we're now seeing the result of us unmasking and not being as vigilant because COVID has dissipated a bit. And all the prevention methods we use for COVID are the same ones we use for flu.
Well, that's interesting you say that because obviously we live in a world right now, Doctor, where we get anything. I think a lot of people think, oh, no, I have COVID. Is there a way to maybe kind of differentiate between the two if you start having symptoms of something?
Well, that's a good question because right now we're not only dealing with cold and flu season or the end of it, we're also dealing with COVID and we have allergy season coming. So it's pretty hard to differentiate those things. For the most part, fevers, runny nose, aches, headache, body pain, even nausea and vomiting can be symptoms of COVID or the flu. They're not usually, most of the time you don't have nausea and vomiting with allergies, but COVID and the flu are kind of hard to differentiate. So the best way to determine it is if you do have fevers, if you're not feeling well, and if you feel like you're just getting worse, get tested. There's plenty of home testing kits to utilize. There are places that still test publicly, and there's availability of tests almost everywhere. So get a test. And the best way to do testing for at home is test once and then test again the next day, just like the package says.
Obviously, it's not possible to predict the future, but, what do you see maybe? What do you think will happen with COVID and the flu over the course of the next weeks and months? Do you see, last summer, no one's really thinking about any of this, and then the fall came around again and it all came right back?
Well, I think just like the models predicted it when we first had COVID appear, the winter months are worse because we tend to be inside, we tend to be bundled up. We're close together indoors, as opposed to outside when we can be outside and breathe fresh air, so to speak. But really what's going to happen depends on us. We have to get vaccinated. We have to get boosted. We have to still pay attention to things like COVID and flu because they're out there. And that BA2 subtype of COVID is still important for us. And even though things look like they're a lot better, remember that testing at home doesn't get reported like testing at the hospital or testing in a testing center. So we may be fooling ourselves a little bit. So we have to have confidence that COVID's going away, but we also have to have a little bit of caution in how we behave.
A good decision, do you think, yesterday by the government to say if you're 50 or above, go get that second booster shot?
Absolutely. I'm not quite 50 yet, so I'll be recommending it for friends and family, and I've already told my mom about it, so we're going to make sure people get the booster when they need it. But it's important to remember that if you haven't been boosted yet, get boosted.
All right, Dr. David Shapiro from St. Francis Hospital, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. We appreciate your time, Doctor.
Thanks very much.